The reading is taken from Luke 24, and it's on the road to Emmaus. Now, that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem, and do not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said. But him they did not see." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things, then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11, and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what they had happened on the way, and now Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. Amen.
Emmaus Road, on Resurrection Day, it says, so the people on the Emmaus Road had just experienced the noise from the women who had been to the tomb and saw that Jesus wasn't there. And the two disciples were heading to Emmaus, which was a village that we know outside Jerusalem, and it was 7 miles from Jerusalem. And so they had headed back to home, if you like, and were just walking and talking. And then it says that Jesus joins them in verse 15. Now, I always clarify this when I'm sharing on the Emmaus Road. For our 21st century minds, if I was walking along the Jordanstown Road or somewhere, and somebody came up and started walking beside me, I would sort of go, "What are you doing here, boy?" You know, you would feel he's a bit weird. You know, I don't know about you, maybe you're comfortable with people just coming alongside you and joining you, but I would actually think, "What are you after?" But so Jesus, in those days, it wasn't really like that. If you were walking along the Emmaus Road, it would be dangerous. And so there was the chance that bandits might come and attack you. So people generally walked together so that it would be greater protection for them. And we know this from the story of the Good Samaritan who was attacked while he was going along. You know, the man who was going along with this Good Samaritan helped out. And so Jesus joins along. So I just want you to get rid of any weirdness you might have at the back of your head, that this was strange that Jesus would just start talking to these people. But he starts to walk along, and they're walking and talking, and Jesus asks them in verse 17 what they're talking about. And, well, they're amazed that he hasn't heard the news. And if you're really thinking about it, it'd be like someone coming up to you today and not knowing that Jerry Adams has been arrested. It's been wall to wall on the news from about Wednesday. You can't escape the fact that Jerry's in custody. Now, if somebody walked along with you and hadn't heard about that, you would sort of go, they either haven't got a TV or they're living in some other place. So you would be quite taken aback. And they would have been taken aback by Jesus. The fact that Jesus didn't know what was going on. There were just 3 crucifixions and, three executions that day in Jerusalem. So it would have been all the go, plus the rumours that his body had been stolen. So everybody would have been talking about it. And so the couple are walking along, Jesus comes alongside, and the couple fail to recognise who Jesus is. And in verse 16 it says, but they were kept from recognising him. And now, does that mean that God was doing something here? And I don't believe he was. Or is it that there's something wrong in the disciples, that they cannot recognise Jesus? On Palm Sunday, if you were here, I shared that we see with our brains rather than with our eyes. Most people think if I just see it with my own eyes, then I believe. Well, that's not true, because when I was doing cognitive neuropsychology, one of the big areas of interest is a condition called agnosia. And when you have agnosia, you've either had a stroke or some form of brain damage, and it prevents you from recognising everyday common things that you recognised before. And so what's happened in psychology and in neuropsychology generally is that they've found that people actually see with their brains. That you see with your brain rather than with your eyes. There's many things that we miss. If you were in Iceland, you would recognise lots of different types of snow. But to you, they're just snow, because that's the way you've been conditioned. Your theories are what help you to see. And we know it in everyday language. We say things like, there's none as blind as them that don't want to see. And so we're aware of it intuitively. But also too, we can see from psychology that people generally see what they want to see. That we have our theories of life, and they will lead us to our conclusions about what we see or what we don't see. Our expectations are the very things that prevent us from making recognition. You will fit into my box. You will fit into my view of people. That's what we say with our brains. And so the theory of the 2 disciples was that Jesus is dead. That maybe the body was stolen. They're not sure what the full information is. But that's the theory that they have, that he is not alive. And so it will never enter into their head that this could be Jesus who's walking alongside. It makes sense. Okay, well, it does to me. Hopefully your journey with me. What I find most interesting about this story is Jesus' diagnosis of the problem. Jesus is walking along with them, and they begin to tell him all that's happened about Jesus being crucified and him rising from the dead. The women have been down in the tomb. And he's listening. And like all good clinicians, you listen first. You just don't run in and begin to give your viewpoint. And so Jesus is walking along. He's listening to them expound what's going on in their lives and what the news was that they were talking about in terms of Jerusalem. And then in verse 25, after listening to them, Jesus says this. He says, how slow of heart you are to believe. How foolish you are, and how slow of heart you are to believe. And this is the reason for their lack of belief or their lack of recognition, that they are slow of heart. Now, when you have a problem with your heart, for all those who have had various forms of heart disease, if the rate of your heartbeat is being under investigation, it's called arrhythmia. Now, if your heartbeat's going too fast, it's called tachycardia, right? But if your heartbeat's going too slow, it's called bradycardia. All right? Okay. Some information. So if your doctor comes up to you next week and says you have bradycardia, your heartbeat's too slow, and if it's tachycardia, it's going too fast. Right. And so, like in most things, the Greek language is used to describe many medical terms. So, like psychiatry, psychology, they're all Greek terms. Gynecology, they're all from a Greek language base. And so, we have here is that Jesus, the word that Jesus uses to describe slow of heart in Luke's Gospel is brados, which is related to bradycardia, that you are slow of heart. And the danger with when you have a bradycardia or a slow heartbeat is that you will pass out because there's not enough blood getting to the brain. Right? And so you can see how it ties in nicely when you think about it physically, that the blood's not getting to the brain. And so what happens is your ability then, you might faint obviously if it's too slow and the blood's not getting to the brain. So the disciples had their slow heart was the problem that Jesus diagnoses. And this is what prevents the mind from recognizing who Jesus is. In the book of Hebrews, it's called dull of learning, or dull of hearing, that you're slow to perceive because of the slowness of your heart. Now, I'm not talking about the heart as a physical organ here. I'm talking about the heart as the, if you like, the source of all emotion and all that we can be. And throughout the scriptures, the heart is described as a place of our affections, the things that where our will makes decisions. And in the Old Testament, the people of Israel are often called hard-hearted. And even in Ezekiel, he says that your hard-heartedness has become like a heart of stone. That your heart has become calloused and is like a heart of stone. And in the New Testament, Jesus predicts in Matthew 24 when he says that the love of many people will grow cold. That you can have a cold heart. So you can have a hard heart, a slow heart, and a cold heart. And for the problem for the disciples on the road to Emmaus was that they had the evidence. They knew that Jesus had died. They had heard the witness of the women at the tomb. The facts were there, but they had a heart problem. And the heart problem prevented them from recognizing the truth of who Jesus was. They were slow of heart, and they still didn't even believe as they even go further after the book, or verse 41 of chapter 24. So what is the treatment for a slow heart? What is the treatment for a spiritually slow heart? And are you willing to hear the remedy today? If you feel your heartbeat has just got down a wee peg or two, it's just too slow. What is the remedy for a hard heart? What's the remedy for a cold heart? And we're going to look at Jesus here, and Jesus is the spiritual master cardiologist. He is the one who knows how to deal best with these heart problems that we human beings have.